Pidherny Recreation Site is an incredible network of mountain bike and multi-use trails built primarily by volunteers. It's put Prince George on the map for road tripping riders and helped our community transition away from simply being a grocery stop for bike tourists on their way to other communities in the region. Prince George is now a destination for riders from all over the world, with endless opportunities to explore. However, the journey from a ragtag collection of short, disconnected bike paths to a massive network of thoroughly laid-out trails wasn't without challenges. The roadblocks and hurdles were taken on by the community, one at a time, purely for the love of the sport and the desire to create a healthy and vibrant off-road cycling scene in Prince George. As the trails matured, so too did the community, and on any given day, you'll find riders of every skill level and background out enjoying the trails and simply having fun on their bikes.
Pidherny's a mixed bag. We've got everything from fun, flowy cross-country to some relatively technical cross-country to some excellent flow trails, amazing climbing trails, incredible wood features that have been built by local trail builders, and they're super exciting. They're fun to ride. We have over 100 kilometers of trail in total.
One of the more rewarding aspects with Pidherny is seeing it go from a rogue, totally off the map, secret mountain bike location to now it's becoming a location where people in adapted chairs and riders of all abilities are able to enjoy.
The positive wide range of people are out there because the trails are so diverse now. The trail building has allowed more people to ride trails and explore, and then grow into these more advanced trails as they get braver and wanting more challenge. It's a great thing, and it's really just started in a way. Mountain biking is such a fresh sport, from the 80s to the early 2000s, and then to now it has jumped leaps and bounds to the point where we have all this wild technology to make it a better experience and really to allow more people to ride bikes.
Mountain biking began perhaps only 15 years prior to it coming to Prince George. The bikes were essentially modified road bikes with broad tires and little else. Quite rough riding, so therefore it was more appealing to young bodies than I.
It started as a really renegade type sport associated with other sports like skateboarding. It was for, the wild child sort of thing. And rightfully so at the time, it was pretty loose and wild.
My wife and I knew a lot of the younger people in Prince George who were really getting into this brand new sport. And so we started to seek out the trails and realized that these trails were in fact often short, connecting trails between cross-country ski trails or old logging roads. They loved imitating the newly developed sport in North Vancouver, in which things like so-called skinnies and teeter-totters and drops off of huge rocks was their main form of entertainment, being risk-takers. I did not immediately take to that idea. That popped the idea into my mind to build mountain biking trails that were longer. We walked the forest and plotted possible trails, determining right from the beginning that we wanted to build trails which were much less challenging for what you might call intermediate or beginning riders. During the mid-1980s, with my wife and I now learning how to use mountain bikes, we thought, well, why not build trails in the Pidherny area because we live so close to that area. The first trail that my wife and I built later became known as the Doctor's Trail, and it was actually running from an old sawmill site up in the area closer to Foothills. And it was based on a very old, mostly overgrown logging road. And that trail was instantly successful, but the quad or side-by-side people began to drive on it, and the trail became not very friendly. I can't remember the year that the golf club bought that property, but we did find out about it when we tried to go on a trail ride and learned that the trail had been walked through with skidders or cats, and then we found out about the golf club. We decided to start building trails in the Otway area, which was instantly successful and led me to design a whole series of loops. We received huge amounts of thanks. So for the next 10 or 15 years, we concentrated on building trails in Otway until we felt that we had done enough.
It all kind of started because of the golf course threat. The PG Golf and Curling Club was going to move the whole golf course up to that area, and that's why all that clearing happened. So that threat kind of kicked off everything, and that's sort of why a lot of the mountain bikers kind of coalesced and created a group to begin with.
Access into the trails also became an issue, and we needed to deal with it if we wanted to maintain and save the trails. I began to become involved with the cycling club, and at that time the master plan was given to me by Dr. Laurie Cook, and he had become aware of the opportunity to authorize some trails in the Pidherny area. There was a sense of urgency, and basically what unfolded is we realized that some of these trails were built on Crown land, which encompassed many stakeholders. So there was the Ministry of Transportation, a woodlot owner, a naturalist club, I believe. And that process was a little difficult, getting everybody on board and being open to communication with all the stakeholders. But once they realized that we were there to authorize the trails and not take over the area, it became easier to move the process forward.
Once they had kind of resolved all that, the rec site had been formalized and the boundary had been created and everything. And then the golf course idea just disappeared anyways. And then that threat disappeared as well.
When Pidherny was established as a rec site, there was a lot of work that was put into it to get to that point. So I fully believe that it was somewhere that I wanted to put my efforts. It was something that was going to make a positive difference and going to last. I didn't really have a ton of experience, and I didn't want to step on anyone's toes, but I did want to help. So it just sort of started in a really basic manner, kind of raking, not really adding anything to the trail, but just maintaining what was there. Over time, I took on a bigger task. I kind of revamped a trail that was just sort of falling into despair. It was a beautiful trail. Unfortunately, the guy that built the trail passed away. So I was sort of honored to kind of like step up, bring it back to life, not change the trail itself, but just kind of get people to be aware of such a good trail. After that, I did a trail called New England Clam Chowder. I did that with a couple of guys. We spent a whole summer on a mission to build a trail from top to bottom, and it ended up working quite well. We focused on making something different from what was at Pidherny at the time. I wanted to see more people get into biking, a larger demographic and skill levels. So that trail that we built, it was considered an intermediate advanced trail, but it was to speak to people progressing and not necessarily extreme, but just good recreational riding.
Most riders like to have trails in which you can rest a bit, coast a bit, and then climb a bit or turn a bit. The concept of body motion is essential to our idea of a trail, and that's called flow. People can go fast if there's not a lot of people on the trail, or they can go slow, or if they've got little kids with them, and they still get a sense of, oh, what's around the next corner? Will I have to climb a bit, or can I go down a bit? When we're doing our initial coursing through the bush, we see the contour levels quite well in our minds, and what we try to do is to link up, let's say, hillsides, followed by a side hill, followed by flat area with twisting turns around the beautiful trees that we see there, the big Douglas firs, for example. And then we start finishing a trail by getting right down below the duff into the actual soil under all of that growth to make a trail that will last for a long time.
I always love woodworking. I do it on the side, and it was something that it was fun to take to the forest and to have a whole different kind of approach to the trail building in Prince George. Those features on Kitchen Sink were absolute monsters. They were some massive projects that just out of sheer will and being stubborn and loving hard work, they got done. Tons of people coming together and lots of muscle to make those happen. The woodwork was so recognizable that it just sort of started to really snowball, and the image of Prince George mountain biking was taking off, and it was partially because some of those features on Kitchen Sink. And that just sort of continued as we built more trails over time. It was just more and more woodwork, more challenging building, and more inventive, kind of wild ways of looking at trail building. As a trail builder, you never feel finished. There's always something on your mind. You always have at least one or two more goals. So after Kitchen Sink came Lazy Susan. Lazy Susan was the second third of the Kitchen Sink loop that now exists. So it was a trail that was half descending and half climbing, also had some wood features. And the final piece of that was Sally Housecoat. So that's uphill almost exclusively. Again, some nice big wooden features, one going across a swamp that's about 200 feet long. And that trail was that third installment, creating a loop, essentially a 5-kilometer loop, bringing it all together.
When I took on the role as director, Pidherny was already an established rec site in partnership with Rec Sites and Trails. And basically what that means is Rec Sites and Trails supports us and also keeps us accountable as to what we do. The first two projects that we took on were mostly maintenance. It was bringing a few things up to standard, getting builders onto the same page, and just kind of organizing what was already happening. A big part of the job was bringing everything up to standard. So there is a provincial standard out there for like what mountain bike trails should be and what is required. So something simple like signage, we need to have signs that make sense. Make sure that people know what a blue trail is going to be like, what a green trail is going to be like, and what they're getting into if they go and ride a black trail. Right now, we're working on a really, really exciting project. We have a local trail building company called New Route Trail Solutions, and they're designing and implementing a blue flow trail that is the first ever adaptive trail at Pidherny. So it's going to allow access to the rec site and to the trails to people who are going to be using sit bikes or adaptive bikes of different styles. It also is opening up a new loop for people to do where they now have an excellent green trail to climb and descend, and now a blue progression trail to descend and try pushing their skills. Maybe try some bigger corners, some faster sections of trail, and hit a few jumps here and there. The coolest thing about this trail is that adaptive riders are going to get to ride it, which is super exciting.
This was the first adaptive trail we ever built. At first, I think we thought it was going to be a walk in the park, and then as we were reading all the guidelines, there are a lot of things that we were backwards to what we were thinking. One thing is the trail grade. We had a concept in our mind that the trail would have to be not nearly as steep, but as we were doing some reading and some research and talking to adaptive riders, all the feedback was the trail needs to be steep and consistent because there is more rolling resistance. You can get stuck as a rider. You can be in the middle of a corner and you're not moving, and we want to make sure that never happens and that will never be an issue on any of our trails. It's been fun. It's a learning experience, and we are excited to do more of them.
Along with the adaptive trail, we are going to be installing new accessible facilities like toilets, park benches, picnic tables, and then of course some signage and adaptive routes in the trail network as well. Some of our trail projects involve hiring a contractor, getting a design done, and then having that contractor come in and implement a trail. But we also have a lot of trails that have been 100% built by a volunteer. So a volunteer comes forward with a proposal saying, here's what I want to do, here's how I'm going to build it, and then we go through a process with Rec Sites and Trails, getting that trail plan approved, and then we go to that volunteer and say, okay, green light, let's go build a trail. There's honestly so many volunteers who have been building trails and doing all of that work of making proposals and wanting to install a trail at the rec site that the list is too large to name. All I can say is that they're the lifeblood of Pidherny, and we're so lucky to have them. If we didn't have volunteers working on the trails, Pidherny would basically not be usable. It would just be a overgrown bush with a few hard to ride trails.
Right when I kind of got into mountain biking, somebody kind of needed to take over the Learn to Ride program, or previously Sprockets program. And I was just kind of like, why not? I kind of helped out for a year before that. And then it happened pretty organically. I kind of just moved in that position. And it's been like that ever since. It's such a sick program. It's my favorite part of the year, really. Just being able to go out and shred with a bunch of kids that are stoked and having a great time. So. Mountain biking's growing so much, so fast that we have somewhere around 60 kid mark every year and 10 to 15 volunteers, which are amazing. To just be able to help people ride their bike is probably the biggest reason why I do, just to put a smile on somebody's face as big as it puts a smile on my face, really, because that's what it's all about. Big thing is just being safe on your bike, learning how to use brakes, how to go down the hill safely. And then, yeah, definitely to have fun is most important with the Learn to Ride program. And just get out there with your friends and be positive and go just enjoy nature, really. The trails that are going in at Pidherny right now are amazing. You know, we have beginners trails, intermediate trails that are actually intermediate trails. I remember when we were a kid, we're riding trails that you're just like, how am I surviving going down this? And now it's stuff that's totally manageable, and you can be a beginner rider and easily go out and have a good time. And then grow as a rider is the biggest part I see. Mountain biking used to be a bit of a, underground, hardcore sport, but now you're seeing families and, parents with their kids and grandparents in some cases and cool stuff like that. For us and myself, for Learn to Ride program and coaching in general, it's just allowing more people to get out there. With those progression trails, you can start off and basically never have known how to ride a bike and get on a mountain bike and go have a good time. So it's awesome that way. It's not scary or as scary anymore, which is really good. The more beginner intermediate trails we can have, the better, really, and Pidherny is making that happen right now.
We've got a lot of ideas. We've got a lot of goals that we're hoping to hit. But right now, I think our main focus is going to be coming up with our master plan for the next 5 years. And we're really looking at expanding the size of the rec site. Pidherny is big, but we see our ridership and usership grow exponentially every year. Every single time I go out on my bike, I'm meeting groups of people that I've never seen before and I haven't seen on the trails, and it's super exciting. But we're starting to notice things like our parking lots are getting over full. The trails aren't full, because once you're out there, you can be alone and you can see next to nobody if you want. But we would love to see the trail network expand, and with that, our bottom parking lot and our top parking lot. Make sure that that support infrastructure expands with the trails.
It's come from a really small, tiny core group of like-minded people to now this massive group of like-minded people.
Getting outside is the core to a healthy, satisfactory life.
As far as the state, it's in a great state. Mountain biking's in a fantastic place right now.